How are we doing, everybody? Welcome back to the Shaun Attwood channel. I'm Ron Swanson. I'm joined here with Aiden, the host of the Lore Lodge, and we're going to be diving into probably the ceremonial mark of my conspiracy journey as a young teenager in the MySpace era, and Bohemian Grove, how it was outed, the legends, the myths, all of it. And Aiden, thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
Yeah, honestly, I'm looking forward to our conversation tonight. And obviously the Lore Lodge, massive. I mean, the content you put out is it's top tier. It's well put together, edited, narrated, all of that stuff. And just before we quickly dive into our main subject, what was your path to YouTube? Was it always your plan, or what was the journey for you?
Just definitely was not always the plan. Coming out of college, I got a degree in medieval studies, so there aren't a ton of options for somebody with a history degree, let alone one that's specific.
Dude, you're literally the first person I've ever heard in my life say that sentence. Okay, so
that's usually how it went. Okay. And the joke I kind of had when I first started making content, when it first started to take off, was how in college people would ask me, oh, medieval studies, that's really cool. What are you going to do with that? And I just say this. But yeah, I went to school for history, and I always had the feeling that I probably wanted to end up being a professor, but felt, you know what, I'll go out, be in the private sector, make some money first. I went into marketing, just trying to take some time off from academia, and realized very quickly that I actually hated marketing and really wanted to go back into academia. So I ended up applying to go to grad school. I was going to go to Wales, go to Bangor University. And then I was sitting at my desk one day, and a TikTok I made just randomly exploded. I had 600 followers on TikTok. I wasn't really making any specific kind of content. And this one video, which was about what's a conspiracy theory you believe in, but can't prove. And I had been working on some stuff with all of these national parks disappearances, just kind of like trying to weave those together in my head out of curiosity. And I basically was like, well, we've got, skinwalkers and Wendigos and Bigfoot and all of these different Native American legends about, something being out there. What if they're all connected? And what if the national parks were created as a way to sort of study and contain that? And that went from, again, I had 600 followers that night. I had 1,200. When I woke up the next morning, it was 9,000. And I looked at the guy who's now I looked at the guy who's now my partner, my co-host, Aiden Thornbury. And I was like, we had literally just been out drinking the night before. Sent him a text. I'm like, we need to do something with this. So that's how the YouTube channel started, was just, hey, this is something that we have the opportunity to do. Let's do it. And since then, I've been able to do exactly what I wanted to do with my career, which was research the things that interest me. Except now I get to do it for an audience of 720,000 people instead of an audience of a classroom, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's the very definition of striking while the iron's hot. Your story, to be perfectly honest.
My buddy Isaiah, it's Wendigoon on YouTube. He always refers to YouTube as the 21st century gold rush. And I think that is exactly the way to put it.
Yeah, except you don't have to leave your house for this gold rush. Okay.
Awesome.
You don't even have to have a house for this gold rush. Let's be honest.
I'm in a 2-bedroom apartment.
let's live that dream, baby. Let's live that dream. But listen, thank you for introducing and giving us that little bit of background. Sure. Let's set the stage for tonight, because a lot of people, a lot of you will have heard of Bohemian Grove. Certainly, at least in passing. You maybe not delved into it super high detail, but Aiden, give us the premise, the public persona of what is Bohemian Grove known as. What do they want you to believe it is?
So I think there's actually two answers to that question. There's the classic, the people who attend it, the answer they want to give you, which is, oh, it's just kind of adult Boy Scout camp. We're all going over there and we're just hanging out. It's how we blow off steam. It's how we hang out somewhere where the paparazzi isn't always lurking. And they can't, we just have some time to ourselves where we can just hang out and sort of be kids again. We have these big boy grown-up jobs. We are executives. We are heirs to, royal houses. We are politicians. And, we're constantly under scrutiny. So we just go here and we just blow off some steam, right? That's the version that the people who actually attend Bohemian Grove want you to have. And then, of course, there is another version of it, which is what I would say is maybe pushing the needle a little too far to the other side, which is that it is some pure satanic ritual where they're going and they're sacrificing children to the god Moloch, and it's all some immense power ritual, which I think is also maybe pushing it a little bit too far. But when you dive into it, what you find is that it's definitely not the innocent little club that they want you to think it is. This is a place where people who were working on the Manhattan Project went. This is a place where you had people who were the crown prince of, I think it was one of the Habsburgs, I believe, went there in the 1970s. And you look at it, and it's definitely it's not something that if you were a practicing Catholic and you showed your priest a video of what you were up to, that they would be like, yeah, that's totally fine.
Absolutely. And you can see on screen here, this is the effigy of Moloch. And, exactly what you're saying there. We're talking about the most powerful men in the world. It was very much a boys club. And I mean, that's a pretty spectacular bonfire area if we're talking about adult Boy Scouting. And I just wanted to just let everybody know what was on screen there. And, where does your needle lie with it? Because obviously it may not be the full-on ritualisticness that it once was, but do you think that it's in homage to what it used to be?
So it's a hard question to answer, because the origin point for Bohemian Grove is in the late 1800s, when it starts off as the Bohemian Club, which is a group of San Francisco area journalists who get off of work and they want to go, do something before they go home to either their wives or their, bachelor pad where they live alone or with several roommates. And so the Bohemian Club was established in San Francisco, and they would meet at a hotel bar. And then over time, they wanted to start doing some bigger stuff. They wanted to, increase the size of what they were doing, increase the scale. And also they were journalists, so they had no money. They needed somebody to pay for their drinks. So they started inviting people into what at the time had originally been a place where they went to discuss art and literature. And a lot of these people were sort of bigwigs, people with a lot of money who could fund their adventures and their activities, which some of them were based off of like Scottish, like the jinx, the custom of the jinx, which to my understanding, not being a Scotsman, is that, just Scotland has sort of a prankster culture in general.
Yeah, we may do. Yeah. We have been known.
Yeah. So the high jinx, they called it, and they would do pranks with each other. And as you get more money flowing in, this is sort of a similar thing to what happened with Freemasonry in a lot of ways. As you get more money flowing in, the people who have the money start to take over. And to them, once they purchase this big swath of redwood forest, it's not just a place where you can go and chat anymore. They start to talk about business and politics and those things intertwining in ways that they really shouldn't. And at the same time, you have the more artsy people who are still doing all of these plays and these rituals that are based upon Shakespeare or something like that. But once you hit around the 1920s, there's a weird intersection between those two things, that you start to see the plays start to feel a little bit more sinister. They're a much grander scale. They don't feel as Shakespearean anymore. So that image that you see of the altar with the fire, that is a ritual called the cremation of care ceremony. And this is the opening ritual of Bohemian Grove. They do this I think it's sort of at the beginning. It's not quite the first day, but what they are doing is in effigy, they are sacrificing Care, who they say is not a child. And if you go back and you read the materials from the Bohemian Club when they first started writing all of these plays, this is actually like the third or fourth iteration of a play that was originally about Apollo. So it goes from being about Apollo to being about Care, and that owl god is supposed to be, from what I understand, Apollo for some reason. I'm not sure how they got to Apollo being an owl, because that's Athena, not Apollo. And what they're doing, or what they say they're doing, is that this ritual is they are burning away their cares, their worldly concerns, so that they can all really just dive in to the debauchery of Bohemian Grove. And this, I think, scares away some of the normies. I think that's part of why they do it, is some people they'll go for the first few days, and then this is kind of the grand opening ceremony. And that might be the point where you're like, you know what? I don't really feel like this is my thing. I'm going to scoot out. And then you get into, you've gotten rid of all the people who might rat. You've gotten rid of all the people who might look down on this, might be willing to, toss it out, because now you've been there and you've got to explain why you were at this ritual. Why were you watching this? And Alex Jones obviously gets in and he looks at this and he's like, what is this? I just saw somebody come in with the chat saying Reagan and Nixon took part. I don't know about Reagan specifically. What I do know is that when Nixon went, he actually was kind of surprised by what he found. And he referred to it in terms I can't actually use on YouTube, but suffice to say, he said it's the gayest thing I've ever seen. And that's one of the other interesting things about it is largely conservative people that go to this. It's a lot of Republican politicians, a lot of Republican donors, royal families, people like that. Not quite the group of, the WEF type people you would expect. So I think that's one thing that shocks a lot of people when they find about Bohemian Grove is these are people who you expect would be very uptight, very by the book conservative types. So what are they doing here?
Right. And that's the thing. It's shocking imagery for very prestigious individuals to be doing in the woods, unsupervised, with, Secret Service agents wandering around the wilderness to make sure nobody can get in. And all of this. And when you said there about the shock value, about weeding out the non-rats and things like this, I mean, it could also be framed as weeding out those who may not want to go past the effigy stage. And it's the whole group of the elites, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's the music industry, whether it's politics, whatever, there seems to be this occultish draw. There's this. I always use the metaphor of what do you get the guy for Christmas who has it all, right? If you're this powerful, rich individual, it is this unobtainable, the power, the allure of the mystic side of all of this. And, I think the ritual that takes place, I mean, you referred to it as a play. And I tell you what, they'll be referring to it as a play as well. I'll tell you that right now.
You can read it. That's the fascinating thing. It took me a while to track it down, but you can read the 1930s version of what's going on there. You can find it on Internet Archive. I'll see if I can find it and send it to you.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where when you're doing mock sacrificing, especially of children, to an owl god from an old pagan line of worship, where I mean, even Moloch's arguably taken different shapes throughout pagan culture. He's been a bull, he's been an owl, and what are they up to? And that's the question here, Aiden. I've got the archive. Nice one, mate.
Yeah, just sent that over to you.
Nice one.
I think this is probably the right one. It looks like it's the right one to me.
Here we go. The Grove Plays of Bohemian Grove Club, edited with an introduction by Porter Garnett, Volume 2. Damn.
Yeah, you can read the whole thing, which is kind of funny when you think about it. Like they're so secretive about this place, and you kind of ask why. What is it? If you're going to publish all of these materials, why are you being so secretive about the grounds itself? And I think personally, for me, I don't go quite far into the conspiracy realm. I just don't think I haven't seen the evidence for it. That it's necessarily intended to. I think there are definitely some people there. Let me put it this way. Sorry, I know I'm sort of going all over the place.
You're okay.
But in the town in which I live, Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, we have a don't come find me. I'm well armed. We have you might call it a ritual, but it's kind of an annual get together where we meet in a park and we set a giant effigy of a phoenix on fire. And in a very similar way, it's kind of an idea of like, take all of your cares and your worries from the past year. It's in December. Take all of your cares and your worries from the past year and just throw them onto the Phoenix and let the year be reborn anew. Which for most of us, we look at that and we're like, yeah, it's just a fun thing we do as a town. There's definitely a few people here and there who seem to interpret it as a legitimate pagan ritual. And depending on how you view those things, sure, some people would probably say that all of us being there, even if we aren't viewing it as a ritual with any significance other than pure symbolism ourselves, are feeding into whatever the actual witches, so to speak, are doing there. And I think that Bohemian Grove is probably much the same way for most of the people who go there. But I think there are a select few who very much might see this as a legitimate ritual to invoke some sort of pagan deity.
Okay, so has anyone ever turned up with a child effigy and thrown it on this fire?
No.
Okay, because that's where there's this. You should try it this year. See how the crowd reacts. Do you know what I'm saying? purely for science, okay? Purely for science, okay? Just get a chicken, bundle, a dead chicken from Walmart, bundle it up in a little thing, launch it in there, and just see how that goes down. Because I imagine there's going to be some shock. That's all I'm saying. And it's whether we know or not if it's a fake effigy, whether we know or not if they are doing real rituals or not, it certainly blew up and snowballed throughout time. And Alex Jones was the one who originally snuck in with some primitive piece of camera equipment and recorded the footage that I was playing earlier. But YouTube era is here. The clout chase is on. And a lot of people have broken in and wandered around and this, that, and the next thing.
I think that Bohemian Grove will probably not be the epicenter of whatever Bohemian Grove is supposed to be within the next 10 years. It'll be somewhere much more secretive that you can only get on a private jet.
Yeah, 100%. And it's almost, I think now, a great distraction tool for, everyone look over here so you don't know what we're doing over there. What was your sort of most interesting finding throughout your research when you were researching Bohemian Grove? Was there any characters or individuals that stood out that were going there, or was there any of the other things that happened there that stood out for you?
I think really the most interesting stuff I saw was from the people who were invited as visitors and their sort of discomfort with what was going on. Because everything from people being like, this is just kind of weird theater kid stuff, to Nixon, who definitely saw some things that would have gotten a lot of Republicans in trouble in the 1970s. But there's definitely a sense that this is a place where people are doing things that have material consequences, and not just in the ritual sense, where you've got people who otherwise should not be interacting, who, if they were spotted talking in a hotel lobby in DC, it would hit the news and people would be wondering, okay, well, why is the CEO of ExxonMobil talking with the chief operations guy from a wind company, and why do they have a couple of congressmen sitting at the table with them? There's nothing on the table about this. What's going on? You're kind of watching lobbying happen in real time, and it's all being watched, it's all being listened to. But when you go to a place like this, you can kind of have those conversations without the worry that the press is going to be lurking. So there were definitely some things about, things being planned that otherwise probably shouldn't have been. I would say one of the things that probably might have happened at Bohemian Grove in the 90s was, in the late 90s, I guess, was the beginning of the plan to invade Iraq. That's the kind of conversation that I would see happening there is, all right, we want to invade Iraq. We want to invade Iran after that. So how do we fit this to the public? Oh, we'll tell them that there's weapons of mass destruction. That's the kind of conversation that I see happening at places like Bohemian Grove. Is that just straight open, let's plot what we're doing. And then we can figure out when we do go out and talk to the public and how are we going to frame this to people?
Yeah, I can 100% get on board with that. 100%. I think though, the theater side of it, the shock and awe value of it all, I can 100% get the sense that that's to weed out individuals if there was to be a next level down the road. I think it sells itself, but the conversations that take place behind closed doors, right? It's one thing if it is behind closed doors, but when it's in the middle of a woods in front of a burning owl, it almost distracts you from the point you've just made. Right? It almost distracts. Like if you were going to have conversations about dastardly deeds, crashing economies, war, and invasions, do it behind the big burning owl, because there's a good chance people are going to be looking at the big burning owl, which
Red
is
herring.
It's a really interesting way of sort of frame it.
And I'm not saying I'm definitely right about that. That's my take on it from what I've seen. I will say I've been in a lot of Masonic lodges, and I've never seen anything to that scale. There's play acting that goes on in Masonic lodges, but you don't have 30-foot tall burning owls.
Yeah, I mean that's for sure. And that's another thing when it comes to Freemasonry and Bohemian Grove and the elites. What's your take on because a lot of people are sensing that the world. There's something coming, right? There's
Mhm.
there's an event building up. Our world leaders in these secret societies in panic mode. I'm not necessarily a big believer in every Freemason is out to destroy the planet or destroy the world, but the actual business model of how a lodge is founded is a very corruptible system. Because if you and I joined a lodge and we're friends for 10 years, and it turns out we're both absolute evil monsters who gravitate to other evil monsters, and then you hit Grandmaster, then you set up a lodge and we're your 10 or 12 founding brothers. Like, evil, that is a corruptible system, okay? And that's how it was done, you know. And
that is precisely how the Illuminati started.
Thank you.
Point for point, what you just said is precisely how the Illuminati started.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, it's with Freemasonry. I think it's probably one of the most misunderstood organizations in the history of the world. I think it actually ranks up there with the Catholic Church in that regard. Because what it starts as, and to be perfectly open, I am a 6th degree Royal Archmason. 7th degree. There's a weird degree system thing there. And I'll admit that there have been some things that I've seen in certain parts of Freemasonry that I've been like, I don't really want anything to do with that. But you're right that the vast majority of Freemasons aren't trying to take over the world. They're not looking for any sort of power. There might be some networking opportunities. You know, I know that I've gone to guys in my lodge and been like, hey, I need some graphic design done.
Talking. My front door's just gone. I'm sorry. That's very rude. Just give me one more.
Totally fine. But yeah, so I saw some business deals go on, like, hey, I'm going to go to my Masonic brother for graphic design instead of going to anybody else first. Things like that. And I'm probably going to have to rehash all of this a little bit, but there is a sense that Masonry is older than it actually is, but at the same time that it's younger than it actually is. The Masonic tradition, the story as it goes, is that the earliest Freemasons were at the construction of the Temple of Solomon. But then you also have stuff in Masonic legend that goes back to ancient Egypt. So when you really drill down into it, there is an origin point for Freemasonry in the 1400s, perhaps the late 1300s, where what it starts off as is literally a Masons guild for Masons, stonemasons.
Right. There was no free travel in those days. It was closed kingdoms. Yeah,
and the very normie explanation for it is, oh, well, you know, as cathedral building went out of fashion, these stonemasons, they were like, well, we still want to have our camaraderie and our brotherhood and everything. Or it could have had something to do with, Freemasons as people who were free to go from place to place rather than being part of a guild. And that it just was this kind of normal, straightforward development out of Freemason or out of stonemasonry. I think that there is an argument to be made that, yes, it did originate as something to do with stonemasons, but I think that it was people using the stonemasons guild in a certain way as a way to hide their activities. And who are those people? There's a lot of answers for that. Some people have said Rosicrucians. I think it was the Templars. I think that when you track back when they start to come out of the woodwork, where they first appear, it lines up very well with the end of the Templar order. And of course, the Templars were, just absolutely scapegoated by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church came out and admitted that many years later that, they didn't actually have any evidence, but the King of France told them they had to do it. And they were kind of in his pocket at the time. So yeah, they did what the King of France said. But the first Freemasons, when you read their original documents, give me 1 second. I can actually pull this up for you.
All Aiden's links are in the description as well, everybody. Make sure you like and share, and you're pushing this stream out. And I hope you're all having a good time, because this is fascinating stuff. The Freemasons, and I think any society, I mean, to call the Freemasons at this stage a secret society, they're a society with secrets.
That's the way we put it.
yeah. And it's, again, the corruptible business model, and we'll get on to the Illuminati and things like that in a moment or two. But
yeah, so here we go. So this is from a document that is known either as the Hallowell manuscript or the Regius poem that was discovered, I want to say, in the 1800s in the library of a man whose last name was Hallowell. But analysis of the wording of the document has dated it to the late 1300s or early 1400s. And what it begins with is, Here begin the constitutions of the art of geometry according to Euclid. And then it goes through the origin of geometry as a philosophy. So it has this sort of, and I've been wanting to do a video on this specific document, but it starts off with, whoever will both well read and look, he may find written in old book of great lords and also ladies that had many children together certainly, and had no income to keep them with, neither in town nor field nor enclosed wood, a counsel together they could then take to ordain for these children's sake, how they might best lead their life without great disease, care, and strife, and most for the multitude that was coming of their children after great clerks to teach them then good works. That is the first paragraph of this poem, which then goes on to charge Freemasons, these adherents to the philosophy of geometry, with things like being charitable, being loyal to king and country, being loyal to God and the Holy Church. That is in there. And there's 15 articles, and I think, what are the others called? 15 points. So I could go through the whole thing. It would take a while, but the key piece here is, here we go. On this manner, through good wit of geometry, began the craft of masonry. The clerk Euclid on this wise it found, this craft of geometry in Egypt land. And then it says that this concept of masonry, that was of geometry, that was developed by Euclid, is then brought to England under the reign of King Alfred. And that's where it takes root, and Freemasonry as an English practice begins. Again, there's a lot to this document, and it's been a while since I actually read it. But after all the masons of the craft to come to him full even straight, for to amend these defaults all by good counsel if it might fall. An assembly then it could let make of diverse lords in their state, dukes, earls, and barons also, knights, squires, and many more, and the great burgesses of that city, they were all there in their degree. They were there, each one always, to ordain for these masons' estate. There they sought by their wit how they might govern it. So it's kind of this idea that you've got a society that is built around a philosophy known as geometry that then comes into England. And when you look at what that could possibly line up with in terms of where everything's said to be coming from, I genuinely think that this was a group of Templars who were hiding out and trying to continue their knowledge, their way of doing things. Because you gotta remember, the Templars were knights, but they were also monks.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot more to the Templar connection with Freemasonry than people often think there is. And in some ways, yes, there was a trend of people who were very powerful becoming Freemasons. It was a way to sort of get yourself involved with the society, to make connections, and admittedly, probably outside of the church. Does that make it satanic? No. But in a time when everything was so dominated by the Catholic Church, you might want a place to talk about things away from prying eyes. And that's kind of what I think this started as, was a group of people who were previously monks. Because what's one thing that Knights Templars would have really understood? Probably masonry, probably stone masonry, cathedrals, things like that. And they found a lot of ways to use the specific terminology within stone masonry to give people symbols. And it was a way that you could communicate by talking about operative stone masonry, pretty much in the open, talking about philosophical concepts that wouldn't get tracked by the people who were potentially going to be looking for you, in this case, the Catholic Church, as it's doing an inquisition to try and root out the remaining Knights Templar.
I'm with you. And you see, I understand where there's so much of history that ties in with Freemasonry. It ties in with the various faiths, and even to some extent elements of modern Freemasonry within the lodges today. But there's still that underlying draw to this mystic side of things.
Yes.
I mean, Crowley and various other people who have gone down in history for, pretty bad deeds. There is this draw. Do you think it's the simple secrecy that creates this mysticalness? I mean, you say yourself you're part of Freemasonry.
Yes.
I mean, I imagine you've not witnessed any child effigies being burnt in front of owl statues.
No.
But do you think there's lost knowledge that people seek? And with yourself being a historian, what's your take on lost knowledge, the mysteries of the pyramids? That crazy guy out in Florida that built the castle out of the coral and stuff like that. Like, what's going on with this? Do you think that is the ultimate goal for these, not just the elites, but these societies?
I think that there's, believe it or not, the story of the Illuminati actually elucidates precisely what I think happened to Freemasonry, but we can get into that in a second. There are definitely some mysteries out there. Even today, the explanation for how the pyramids were built, I understand why people don't buy it. I get it. It seems like such a ridiculous way of doing things. But we also don't have an alternative for it. And so until we have an alternative, we kind of have to respect the prevailing belief. I'm one of those people who I might disdain Jimmy Corsetti. I can't stand the guy, but I also look around and I'm like, maybe there was something. Göbekli Tepe does seem a little bit too advanced for the archaeologist narrative that, it was just a meeting place where nomadic tribes came to exchange things. And I recently got into a conversation with an archaeologist on Twitter because I said, if that was what it was, then why don't we have any examples of it in North America? Why, if these nomadic hunter-gatherers were able to build this here, how come they never did it elsewhere? It seems like you would have more examples, especially from more recently nomadic groups, of them doing this, and yet we don't. And the response from the archaeologist was, well, we do have examples of it. And then he proceeded to post a bunch of nouns. And I'm like, yes, nouns, very impressive. A lot of effort goes into that. Not nearly as much effort as constructing Göbekli Tepe and all of the other things surrounding it.
Right.
That clearly something else was going on here. And that forces us to question one of two things. Either were we wrong in the assumption that megalithic architecture only takes place after agriculture, or were we wrong about how early agriculture happened? Personally, I think the latter makes a lot more sense, especially because we do know that just before Göbekli Tepe is constructed, there is a period of massive climate change. You don't have to go down into the oceans overwhelmed all of the continents and everything. You can just look at it and say, yeah, an early Bronze Age or a Copper Age society that was living on the coastline would be absolutely demolished by 25 feet of sea level rise over a very short period. It would be completely insurmountable. They'd have to retreat up into the hills. And how would they try to preserve their knowledge? Well, they would probably take what resources they had left and devote that to building sites that had symbols that explained their own significance to people who understood them at the time. And then eventually it just becomes obscure even to the people who built it. We have examples of that throughout history, where by the time something works its way down in culture, the people who are practicing it, for example, there was a Roman practice of throwing effigies of a man and a woman into the Tiber River. And we have this, into the late Republican period. I think even into the imperial period, nobody at the time knew why they did that. It was obscure to them. The tradition had existed for so long that they weren't totally sure what they were doing there. Right. Did it originally come from some form of ritual sacrifice? Probably. But by the time they're talking about it in their writings that we have, they don't know. And that's only a period of probably 600, 700 years. We're talking with the pyramids, with Göbekli Tepe, we're talking thousands of years between people actively doing it and then people finally sitting down and writing about it. The pyramids are probably one of the easiest examples because they actually were recording things within 150 years of that. And people say, why doesn't the pyramid, if that was built as a tomb, why doesn't it have tomb engravings and everything? It's because they just weren't doing it yet. We don't have any examples predating the pyramids of people inscribing tombs in Egypt. That starts about a century and a half later. And I honestly can't remember how I got here. All right, the secret knowledge thing. So I think that there was a sense, obviously, when you have that sort of esoteric, all of these mentions of Euclid and of geometry as a philosophy, and how it gets involved with architecture and math. I think that there's definitely some sort of There were secret signs and symbols they were using to communicate. But I think that to some extent, by the time you get to the early 1800s, those signs and symbols are a little bit obscure to people like Albert Pike. And that's the guy everybody brings up with Freemasonry is, oh, well, look at Albert Pike and Morals and Dogma. I can tell you right now, most Freemasons have never read Morals and Dogma, nor do they care what Albert Pike had to think. Nobody alive today is giving any credence to Albert Pike as a man. And Manly P. Hall, sort of a similar situation. He did eventually become a 33rd degree Mason, but he wrote all of that stuff before he was a Freemason at all, before he was even an entered apprentice. So I think that there's this period, and it's probably in the mid 1700s, where Freemasonry goes from being a Christian philosophical order that uses the signs and symbols of geometry and stonemasonry to communicate its values and to sort of explain who is in the organization, who isn't, into there's this conflict between the moderns and the ancients, which are two parties within Freemasonry, and this occurs in the 1740s and 50s, where after that, you start to see the split between the York Rite and the Scottish Rite, especially in America. There was also another thing that happened where you had Jacobite Masons who were from Scotland, who supported the Stuart dynasty, who came down into France, and they started practicing Freemasonry kind of in isolation from the British lodges. And that's where the Scottish Rite and the Grand Orient come from. And those are the ones that get really into Hermeticism, and they start looking into rituals, and they sort of start to come up with these Gnostic ideas. You get the Christian Kabbalah involved, which is, of course, based upon the Jewish Kabbalah. That doesn't happen in the same way in England or in many of the northern American colonies, particularly. For example, the northern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite has significant differences from the southern jurisdiction, which is the original one. So there's this weird, you look at it as Scottish Rite, and you think, okay, it comes from Scotland. Well, it came from Scottish people who moved to France and then gave their ideas to Americans in South Carolina. And that's where Albert Pike comes in. In the North, you've got these letters from George Washington that are occurring even just a few years before the development of the Scottish Rite, where he's talking about how he doesn't think that the English lodges, as he refers to them, and this is to differentiate them from the French and the Scottish, the English lodges, that would be today known as the American Rite or the York Rite, those guys, he says, haven't been infiltrated by the Illuminati. Like he thinks that he doesn't attend a ton of meetings anymore, but he still thinks that the English lodges are on the ball. They're not working with the Illuminati, and you don't need to worry about that in Freemasonry. So there's a clear split occurring between basically 1776, when the Illuminati are created in Bavaria, and the early 1800s, when you start to see the York Rite and the Scottish Rite really take shape. As a Mason, I avoid the Scottish Rite like the plague. And don't get me wrong, I know a lot of Scottish Rite Masons. They're all good people. I think they look at the signs and the rituals and things as pure theatrics to impart moral messages. To me, I'm a little bit more traditional in my beliefs as a Christian, so I don't like the idea of appealing to Hermes. I don't like the kind of flirting with the idea that Lucifer is sort of a misunderstood term. It is, don't get me wrong. It's only in 2, I think, translations of the Bible, the term Lucifer, but that doesn't mean that we misunderstood Lucifer. Doesn't mean we misunderstood the devil.
Correct.
So I have some issues with the Scottish Rite. I think it veers a little bit too much into Gnosticism and universalism for my liking. Whereas the York Rite, on the other side, when you get to the terminal point of that system, you get to the Knights Templar, which we have no strong connection between the Masonic Knights Templar and the actual Knights Templar. There is no direct lineage there. But if Freemasonry does derive from Templar activities, then there is a connection. Just the current one. It
would be the required faith, though.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is with the York Rite, you get to that terminal point where you become a Knight Templar. You must, in order to become a Templar, you must be a Trinitarian Christian. You can't be a Mormon. You can't be a Unitarian. You can't be Jewish. You can't be Muslim. Can't be Hindu. All of those things that you can be to become a Freemason in the first place. If you get to Knights Templar, that is pure Christianity. You cannot diverge. Unfortunately, there are lodges who have gotten very strict about it. Not lodges, I think chapter is the term. commandery. Sorry. So there are groups who have allowed people in who aren't Trinitarians, but I think that's just kind of the decay of the system over time. It starts off, obviously, with the Hallowell manuscript as a purely, explicitly Christian organization. And then by the time you get to today, you've got groups who don't even require you to be a Trinitarian Christian to become a Knight Templar. And I think you see sort of the same thing with a lot of churches going on. You know, the Anglican Church, when it started, was very similar to the Catholic Church. Henry VIII was known as the defender of the faith. And now the Anglican Church has a female archbishop. It's gotten so liberalized. So you have, I think, a tendency for organizations as they become more popular to liberalize in their beliefs and then eventually lose the plot of why they started.
Yeah.
I think Freemasonry started as a Christian philosophical organization. And I think that over time, as similar things happened, like with the Bohemian Grove group, as influence came in and power and money from elsewhere that these lodges needed to survive, you need a king or a duke to fund you if you're going to be doing the kind of work you want to do as an organization. So you let them in, but then they want to change things. You kind of have to go along with it. And I think that happened to Freemasonry over time.
I could 100% buy into that. It's the natural progression of the human condition of I want more power, or I want to shape the power in my image and all of this. Now, you mentioned the founding of the Illuminati. I think that's another one that everyone has heard of. Let's dive into that a little bit. And you talked about how you think that's how the Illuminati was founded. I personally 100% believe that when the ships left the UK and discovered America and the Freemasons arrived over there, they were like, you know what? We could be getting up to some stuff and no one could be seeing us. I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there. The first stone that was laid in Washington was a Masonic symbol stone, and let's delve into that. The Illuminati, the corruptibility of the business model of Freemasonry, and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so, and I think the geography of the thing is incredibly important when it comes to Freemasonry and the development. A lot of people have the misconception that Freemasonry started in 1717. It didn't. We have lodge minutes back in 1599. So it's at the very least, that's the first, actual lodge procedures that are recorded that we have. And then we have the Hallowell manuscript, which is dated to around 1400 and clearly is Masonic, but it portrays a very different version of what Freemasonry is. And it's a little bit more explicit in sort of how it almost is saying, like, yeah, a good leader should be a Mason. Why? But as it develops and it goes throughout time, you get the English system of Freemasonry makes its way over to North America, and that is the kind being practiced by guys like Ben Franklin, who is the first Grand Master of the Pennsylvania Grand Lodge. And so that it takes that shape, and it follows very much in line with the English version of things. Over in France, it comes along from the Scottish tradition, and they start to meet in their lodges. And the thing that the big difference here is largely that France is Catholic. So the United States in its formative years is Protestant. Britain is Protestant. Scotland's Presbyterian. They come over to France and they are a bunch of Presbyterians meeting in secret. And the Pope catches wind of this and he sends somebody to go and ask them what's going on. And they won't let his guy in. And so the Pope's like, well, why won't they let our guys in? They must be doing something anti-Catholic if we're not allowed to even go in and see the proceedings. Meanwhile, in England, if the king wanted into a Freemason lodge, you would still tell him no. But they didn't have the same degree of oversight, and because it had developed in England in the first place, the Anglican Church was always aware. Church of England always knew about Freemasons. There were Anglican bishops who were Freemasons. So when it moves over to America, it's still Protestant. You don't have that top-down authority quite as much. And Protestantism in America is different from Protestantism in England. And there are a number of things that sort of develop. But the main thing that you see is that in England and America, where you've got mostly Protestants, Freemasonry doesn't get as weird. But in France, where it ends up being banned by the Pope in 1743, I want to say, it gets weird because suddenly they can't meet quite as openly. Yeah, you wouldn't just be allowed into a Masonic lodge randomly, but now you don't even know where the Masonic lodges are. You don't know who is a Freemason. In America and England, everybody's open about being a Freemason because there's nothing banned about it. In France, it's now illegal. It gets you excommunicated. So they go underground, and this hostility from the Catholic Church breeds a sort of anti-religious sentiment within the French Freemason lodges, which just kind of like ends up it becomes a vicious cycle where the Catholics ban Freemasonry and the Freemasons get anti-Catholic, and then the Catholics get even more anti-Freemason in return. And then you have people who are Freemasons who are openly anti-Catholic involved in the French Revolution. One core difference between American and British Freemasonry and what we call continental Freemasonry, which we don't consider to be legitimate Freemasonry, is that in American and British lodges, you are not allowed to discuss politics. You can't campaign. You can't talk about, who you think is right and who you think is wrong. And you absolutely cannot plot insurrections. There is absolutely none of that in French Freemasonry. They are not just allowed to plot rebellion and insurrection, sedition. They're encouraged to do it. You're not just not allowed to talk about religion. You're encouraged to undermine it. You're not, and also French Freemasonry, you can be an atheist. You can't be an atheist in American Freemasonry or British Freemasonry. You can be a woman in French Freemasonry. American and British is male only. Wow. So yeah, French Freemasonry really is just kind of walking around in a skin suit.
That's just mad.
It is not Freemasonry in any way. The core tenets of Freemasonry: you have to be a man, you have to believe in a divine creator, and you have to be a free man. You can't be a slave. That just goes back. That's a dated thing. Those are the core issues, and you have to be an adult. France doesn't have any of that. You can be a woman, you can be an atheist, and you don't have to follow any of the rules that we have over here about not talking about religion, not talking about politics.
That's wild.
Yeah. So when people say that the Freemasons were behind the French Revolution, I look at that as a Mason and I'm like, yeah, probably. I could totally see that from French Freemasons. That's just the kind of thing they do. When you say that Freemasons were behind the American Revolution, you're also very much correct, but not in the same way. A lot of the men who were involved in the American Revolution were Freemasons, but they weren't out of sync with the rest of the revolutionaries. Yeah. It was kind of that they all just American Protestantism and Freemasonry just went hand in hand for a while there. But what you do have is both of those things happen after the creation of the Illuminati. Both the French and the American Revolution happen after. The American Revolution is almost simultaneous. 1776, the Illuminati are founded in Bavaria. 1776, the United States signs and sends over the Declaration of Independence. Those things happen at the same time. The French Revolution is later. It's almost 20 years, a solid 15 years, I think, after. But what happens with the Illuminati, and I'm sorry for being so long-winded about this.
Okay, don't worry, go on.
Yeah, is that in around 1770, this guy, Adam von Weishaupt, is a professor of law at a university in Bavaria. And he's kind of an early Reddit atheist, I'll call him. Yeah, he's very subversive, and he's very up on his own philosophy. And he wants to get rid of the monarchy. He wants to get rid of the church. He thinks that all of that is bad. He's a really radical Enlightenment thinker, but he's also not very smart. Like he's not the kind of brilliant Enlightenment thinker that, Benjamin Franklin is, that John Locke is. So what he does is he can't really convince anybody his own age, anybody of his own status, to join him in this mission. But who he can convince are about a dozen law students. And he invites them to parties. He pays for their drinks. He makes them feel really included and really special. And then he starts telling them that, he's got this secret knowledge that he'll share with them. And he gets them involved in his little cloak and dagger group. And slowly but surely, they develop a little club that they start calling the Illuminati, the Enlightened. And so as that club, starts to grow, it does start to attract some attention. And he's like, I need a way to be able to do this without people questioning what I'm doing. So he becomes a Freemason, and he gets all of his buddies to become Freemasons. And then once he's got enough of them in their lodge, he manages to take over a lodge, and he becomes the Worshipful Master. To be clear, Worshipful Master, you don't worship the master. He's just full of worship. That is the person who is elected to lead the lodge for a period of 1 year. There's a bunch of other officer positions, senior warden, junior warden, things like that. And so he takes over a lodge. And then eventually he gets powerful enough to go into the higher degrees, to create a new system of higher degrees. And he and a guy named Adolf von Knigge managed to start. Yeah, I know. What a name.
You got to prep yourself a couple of times for that one.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you were almost canceled on Twitter there. I'm telling you that right now. That was a close call.
Yeah, what a name. This guy starts. That's where I said Adam von Weishaupt isn't a smart guy. He's good enough as a con man to get these people involved, but once he's got past the core Masonic degrees, that he's just sort of like taken and rewritten to be the next set of 3 degrees for the Illuminati, he needs some help. So he enlists the help of this Adolf von Knigge guy. And he starts writing some of the other higher degrees, and they're making it up as they go along. But they keep telling the people below them, oh, well, we have the esoteric knowledge. You just haven't gotten to the point where you're not at the right level for it yet. There's a great Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode that's about, I think, Dennis, if I remember correctly, starting a cult. And it went exactly like that, where he's just pulling people in, getting them onto the bottom floor and telling them, just hold on, just keep being dedicated and you'll eventually get the secret knowledge. And then he gets to it because his goal isn't to actually share any secret knowledge.
No,
his goal is to start a cult large enough to overthrow the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And so they keep doing it. They keep growing. Eventually they've got a whole jurisdiction. And then he manages to appeal to the authorities and get granted the ability to start his own Grand Lodge. And then he's basically controlling Freemasonry in Bavaria. And he gets too big for his britches. He goes too far outside of it. He starts adding things to Freemasonry that aren't supposed to be there, like fomenting insurrection, like derision for religion, starts openly talking about how they want to undermine the Catholic Church and all of that. And he might have gotten away with it, except for 2 things happen. One, the Freemasons catch wind of what he's doing. And they're like, oh, hell no, that's not us. That is not us. You're not a Freemason anymore. They basically do the Freemason version of excommunicating somebody. They say, you're not Freemasons. You are irregular. We do not recognize you, which is currently what the British and American lodges say about France. You are not real Freemasons. Stop using our name. He refuses. The problem is that at almost the exact same time, the Bavarian authorities have caught wind that there are rebellions brewing and that they're brewing in secret societies. So they just outright, across the board, ban secret societies. Not just Freemasonry, not just the Illuminati. They ban secret societies entirely. And that's, I think, I think it's 1783. So Adam Weishaupt is, of course, now an enemy of the state. So is Adolf von Knigge. They both have to flee Bavaria. And so do most of the officers of the Illuminati, as it's come to be known. We don't know where they went, but I don't think it's a coincidence that just a few years later, France explodes into a revolution that matches perfectly with Illuminati ideology. I mean, everything about the French Revolution is right in line with everything Adam Weishaupt was saying. All of it. And I think that's why you get these letters from George Washington when he's written to being asked about Freemasonry, that he says, no, that hasn't penetrated the English lodges. I'm aware of what's going on with the Illuminati over in Europe, but I haven't seen any evidence of that here. And then the Scottish Rite comes into being. So to me, the way I look at it is that you have this trajectory of Freemasonry goes from Scotland to France to Bavaria, becomes the Illuminati in Bavaria. Illuminati goes to France. Illuminati sort of orchestrate the French Revolution. And then it pops over to the United States in the form of Scottish Rite Freemasonry in the early 1800s and starts to take root there. Thankfully, Americans, by and large, were still so agrarian in the South that the ideas of the French Revolution really didn't work for us. When we looked over at what was going on with the French Revolution, we went, yeah, we don't know. We're not getting involved in that. Like that's not the same kind of revolution as what we just did. We didn't even want, this is a big misconception about the American Revolution. We didn't want to be independent of the Crown of England. That was not the original goal. When we started sending people over to England to complain about our situation, we were like, hey, King George, Parliament's really not being chill right now. They won't listen to us, and we would like to govern ourselves as loyal subjects of the crown. And so that kind of fell on deaf ears, and Parliament comes back and they say, hey, well, how about we let you send representatives to Parliament? They won't get a vote, but they will be allowed to sit in and they will be allowed to express their opinions. And the Americans once again went, no, that's not good enough. It takes 2-3 months to get across the ocean. We can't adequately advise you of what's going on over here in time, and you're probably just going to ignore us anyway. So please, King George, please help us. And eventually it gets back to the Americans that King George has no interest in helping. And in fact, that the order to start clamping down on American shipping, the order to start policing smuggling more often, the order to make sure that it basically went from Americans were running everything over here under the Crown's permission, and then the Crown started sending people over to rule directly as British subjects, and everything went to hell. And then that's where Boston Harbor ends up blockaded. New York ends up being occupied. We have British ships patrolling our waters, preventing us from smuggling with the Dutch. And then the American Revolution, once they realize that King George isn't on our side, that's when America goes into revolt. And yeah, there's a bunch of Freemasons involved, but there was nothing Masonic about that. That was purely a bunch of economic factors. It was economic and nationalist.
Yeah.
In France, you can't say the same thing. The French Revolution is Masonic, French Masonic to the core.
That's wild. I see. I've never dived into the French side of Freemasonry and what it entails. That's really, 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 really interesting.
Much bogus.
It's fascinating though, because you're very well versed in all this history, and you hear from so many people that aren't part of these, for a start, not part of the institution, to see it from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
I was really, 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 really interested. Now, as far as 2025, okay, sure. The Illuminati, the Freemasons, the Cabal, the Bloodlines, okay, mm-hmm. Where do you sit with it all? Is there a secret, bloodline family that sit above a small cafe in Switzerland and decide the world's economy and all of this? Where do you land with it?
Yes and no.
That's the safest damn answer, bro.
Yeah, I'll explain. Don't worry. On the one hand, the idea that the Freemasons so are you aware of a man named Robert Anton Wilson?
I don't, possibly, but right off the top of it.
No worries. He was an American writer who was prominent in the 1960s and 70s, primarily writing these. I think it was the Discordia series. Basically, he was a troublemaker. He was a subversive, and he was one of the guys who wanted everybody to question everything. He was an early truth seeker type, but he was a lot more grounded in a lot of ways. So his goal was he was going to write a series of books, and he was going to write articles and things. And the whole idea was to get people to question the powers that be. And one of the ways that he did that was in the 1960s, I think it was 1969, he ended up collaborating with an editor at Playboy magazine to publish a series of, because back then Playboy actually was a magazine people read for the journalism for some reason. But he was working with somebody there, and he would send in these letters to the editor claiming to be a member of the Freemasons and the Illuminati, and saying how they were all connected and there was one big global plot. And so a lot of our current understanding of that comes from Robert Anton Wilson making things up. At the same time, I look back, and there are a lot of people who say, no, French Freemasonry, that the Freemasons didn't run the French Revolution. I think it's pretty obvious that they did. I think that the Illuminati survived Bavaria. I think that they did maintain a sort of secret organization. I think that it probably does utilize certain aspects of Freemasonry. I mean, it worked. The only reason it didn't work is because there was a coincidence that knocked it out, and you no longer have to worry about the Catholic Church or monarchs being a significant issue when you're doing secret stuff. So France becomes a petri dish for that kind of thinking, because they have no monarchy, they have no state religion. They kind of do oscillate back and forth, but you have a consistent breeding ground for people to go and promulgate these extremely, what we might call, liberal ideas for the time. And I think that didn't stop. I don't think that Scottish Rite Freemasonry is part of it. I think that they just got weird and started being like weird theater kids about everything. But I think that I think that group of people probably does still exist. I don't think that it's necessarily in the shadowy organization form that we expect, but they created an ideology. And that ideology became very pernicious. You see it with Marx. You see it with a lot of postmodernism. And you see this, I think, in the most blatant, blazing terms now, this idea that we should create a world that is beyond nationalism, a world that is beyond identity, that is beyond religion, beyond statehood, beyond monarchy. And I think you see that with the WEF, the World Economic Fund, World Economic Foundation. I mean, I look at everything they do. Klaus Schwab is literally descended from a guy who collaborated with the Nazis.
Yeah, he is. You just look at the guy, and it's like, you are a vampire. You straight up vampire.
Yeah, I think obviously this is looking at it in a very comical way, but have you seen the Kingsman movies?
Oh, dude, I can't remember if I've seen No, that's the British Secret Service movie. No, I've not. I'm not.
Okay, if you haven't, you need to. They're phenomenal. They're incredible movies. Very funny, great action. But point is, there's sort of an undercurrent that develops, particularly in the third movie, where they've got guys like Rasputin and Lenin and Hitler and all of these guys in one room, all just planning the chaos that will allow them to take over the world. And I think that, that's definitely a more direct illustration of it. I don't think that you've got a bunch of people necessarily meeting in a cafe in Switzerland, like you said. But I think that there are people who think that they know better than the rest of us, who think that, they can create a much better world. We just have to get rid of these pesky traditions that we've created over the last tens of thousands of years. We just got to get rid of that. We got to escape religion. We have to escape national identity. And once we do that, we can create the utopia we've always wanted. And I think that, there might be organizations that are directly dedicated to it, and they might meet in shadowy rooms and talk. But at the same time, I don't think it requires that. And I think that if we try and focus on any one organization and say, that's it, that's where they're doing it, that's what they want, because then they can find a way to rework things so that we all look stupid. And once we look stupid, then who's going to believe us in the future? It's the same kind of thing that annoys me about guys like Jimmy Corsetti and Michael Button, where I believe that we don't have the full story to Göbekli Tepe, and something weird happened there, and then they go make a mockery of it, and it's harder for me to explain to everybody why they should pay attention. So I think that there's sort of a deliberate attempt to put one organization at the top so everybody can focus on that. And like we said with Bohemian Grove, then while everybody's focused on that thing, they're moving everything over somewhere else. I think that it's probably much more similar to, you go on college campuses and there's a bunch of communists. Yeah, they have a club, but is that club why they believe what they believe? No, they created the club as part of their mission because they just believe in these things. Yeah. And so I think what you've got to do is make people aware that, yes, there are groups of people out there who, organized or disorganized as they may be, they do think that they know better than everyone. They do want to change your way of life, and they're going to do it, whether it's through this organization or that organization. What they're really going to do is they're going to make sure that they prop up their people through whatever networking they have and have those people run for office in various countries. They're going to have them become, congressmen. They're probably not going to go for a president. It's too early for that. But a few congressmen here, a few delegates there, a few people who are, I can't remember the term for people who are representative of countries in the European Union, but a few European Union reps here. And slowly over time, you're able to just penetrate and spread the ideas. And once you have a little bit of power and you have that institutional position, you can get people to start the propaganda machine. And once the propaganda machine is going, you don't actually have to go out and convince anybody individually, person to person, like Adam Weishaupt had to do, that, hey, you should join my Illuminati. The community is out there doing it already for you. So I think that's kind of one of the dangers, and I've been saying this for a while, is the CIA's favorite person is a conspiracy theorist.
Of course.
Because as soon as you give the powers that be something to focus on and debunk, you've screwed yourself, because they're going to do everything in their power to warp reality to make you look dumb.
100%. Did you know the story of the CIA satellite research something, and then this renowned professor moved very close to the institution, and he thought he was intercepting communications with the CIA and aliens, and the CIA knew he had developed a way of decrypting the CIA's encrypted stuff in his search for communications with other life forms. And because he just so happened to move very close to where the CIA was doing this, he was picking up and decoding stuff. They picked up on him decoding it, and for like the next 3 years just fed him absolute nonsense, to the point he barricaded himself in his home, armed himself because he thought the gray aliens were coming after him and his family. And the FBI, the CIA were like, yep, we did that.
There was a great podcast episode from God, it's escaping me. The guy's name is George Kiriakou, I think.
Okay. That sounds familiar.
I might be messing up his name. No, it's not George Kiriakou. Man, what was it? John Kiriakou. That's what it was. Former CIA intelligence guy. Actually went to prison for blowing the whistle on the enhanced interrogation program.
Okay.
And he was on a show recently, and I'm trying to remember the name of the show, because it was incredible. The guy was such a good interviewer.
Okay.
That he just let the guy talk, and really just only chimed in with the kind of like what you've been doing, just like very good interviewer. Just let the man talk, and what he was saying was basically like, yeah, the CIA does all sorts of stuff that
crazy.
You would never like. Crazy. They plotted, and he just straight up says it, that the entire invasion of Iraq, the whole WMD story, Saddam Hussein, all of it was fabricated because they wanted to invade Iraq, and then they wanted to invade Iran. It was all there. There were never WMDs. They knew it. They knew that. They created fake intelligence so that they could convince people. And at first, the CIA actually didn't want to do that, so they got rid of all the people in the CIA who were saying no. And then Dick Cheney just kind of led the charge. And of course, it helps that George H.W. Bush was head of the CIA at one point in his life too. He's the president's dad at the time. So, but yeah, they completely fabricated all of the reasoning to go into Iraq, and the CIA just does that. You know, when they need to fabricate something, that's just what they do.
Yeah, 100%. It's crazy how it all intertwines. It's crazy how the letter organizations, the secret societies, the pull that they have on us all. Now we're sort of getting to the end of our time here, but we've got a couple of questions, Aiden, if that's right, from our wonderful side chat. First one is from Goldie. Has Aiden read The Holy Grail and The Holy Blood?
I think I have it on my shelf. I have not read it, but okay. I do know there's a guy in my lodge who, such a nice guy, but he has said some things that throw me for such a loop, but he very much is one of those people that's like, yes, Jesus Christ did not actually die on the cross. He did marry, and he was never God himself. He was the Son of God, and his bloodline is continued. And there were secret groups that were that were protecting this story and that have carried on through today, and that he does still have a bloodline on Earth. I have picked up a few pages and read a couple of them, and I've seen errors that were not related to even really the general subject matter of the book that made me raise my eyebrows as a historian, but I haven't had a chance to really go in. I probably will do a video on it.
Okay,
I
well.
honestly have been needing video topics, so I'll probably do that soon.
Yeah.
I'm at that point where I need like 2 weeks to be able to read enough to do the
Yeah.
videos I want to do, and I don't have 2 weeks. I put a video out every week.
Yeah, well, it's well. Look, Gully, thank you for your question. What are your thoughts on Timothy Hogan from Sam?
That is a name I'm not sure I'm familiar with. Timothy Hogan. Oh, I guess he is a. I'm just going and looking at what the
of course
Freemason opinion is. Well, I can tell you that from the other Freemasons, generally it's not good. Says, what do you guys think of Tim Hogan? The fellow went on Gaia, oh God, and talked about how they found multiple arcs of the covenant. Jesus was initiated in Egypt. Mana was an alchemical, nutritious concoction. Yeah,
multiple arcs of the covenant.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Right.
The Ark of the Covenant, from what I understand, disappears with the Babylonian conquest of Israel, of Judah.
Dude, it's in that big warehouse at the end of Indiana Jones in a wooden crate, bro. Okay,
I wouldn't be surprised. I think that's one of the most reasonable explanations for where it is.
True to life story. Also, fun fact: if you remove Indiana Jones from that movie, nothing in the movie changes. The entire movie plays out in the same ways. Nazis still get melted. The Covenant, the Ark of the Covenant, still goes in the warehouse. Fantastic. Look,
part of the reason I love the Indiana Jones movie so much is you're just being taken along for the ride. You know, it's a very reasonable character.
Yeah, you got to remember though, like those movies come from a magical time in movie making. I mean, Back to the Future, probably one of. Could you imagine if they tried to release Back to the Future now? Right, like and also it's like a Beatles song. We don't need a remake. Okay, of Back to the Future. We're good as it is. But
Hollywood's too afraid to take risks.
Listen, what is Hollywood? It's like 2 production companies now, and they're all crap. Okay, like let's be honest.
YouTube,
like,
we're making it work. You know, I don't think we've done the official announcement yet, but I'm executive producing a movie. I know Wendigoon is working on some stuff too. He put out a movie last year, 2 years ago. So I think that Hollywood's about to see some threats from crowdfunded and self-funded YouTube programs.
Listen, they've been quaking for a while. Now I thought, there we go. There's Wendigoon down there. So if you guys are on the Lore Lodge, scroll down, and he's got all of his comrades down here. So make sure you go and subscribe. Go and check it all out. Now, just stay where you are, Aiden, as I close the show. There's a couple of things I want to ask you before you leave. But everybody who's been watching this evening, thank you so much for being here. It was a really, really just mind-blowing discussion with Aiden about the Freemasons, about Bohemian Grove, and the Illuminati. And I imagine as soon as this ends, it'll be comments of we need to get Aiden back. We need to get Aiden back. So let's figure something out for our next topic too.
I'm always down.
Yeah, it's been a right pleasure, and thank you to everyone who's been here. Thank you to the mods and the admin, the Shaun Attwood crew. You people at home, without you, Aiden, and the rest of us on YouTube are just lunatics on Zoom calls talking to each other. So really, you guys are the ones that make it all happen. So thank you all for being part of it, and we'll see you all in the next one. Aiden, stay there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.